Listeners, thank you so much for joining us in this edition of the Africa Learning Together Knowledge Series. We are recording live today from the Kigali Convention Center in Rwanda on the margins of the Foundational Learning Exchange. Today we have a very important guest with us, all the way from New York, from the UNICEF headquarters. It's our pleasure to welcome and to join us on this podcast, Dr. Pierre Rebello Brito, who is the Global Director of Adolescent Education at UNICEF. You've asked me to call you Pierre.
Yes.
But I'll have to be formal first before I transition. Dr. Brito, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And what a fabulous opportunity to be able to use the power of your platform to talk about something that is so central, not just to the lives of every child, every family, every community, but the continent.
Thank you very much. And we're quite privileged to have you on the platform.
Thank you.
We know how busy it is for you. But to get started, conflict in the Middle East, Russia-Ukraine contestations, Africa is in different dimensions. It's upside down and it's not looking like the best of times for every child across the world, which I know it's what UNICEF cares about. Could you analyze or give us a sense of your thoughts in terms of where you think foundational learning stands within the context of global conflict and the global circumstances that we are experiencing today?
Thank you for putting this very paramount issue within the context of the world we live. And I'm glad you've brought up the fact of that because currently it's considered the hardest time to be a child ever. So really what children are facing right now with not just the geopolitical forces, but we look at also the impact of climate. We look at the impact of disruptions, the economic fragility. Lives of children are really turned upside down. And for us at UNICEF, the scale of the problem is so massive that we really need to support governments with scalable solutions that can have high impact, but also urgently.
Yeah.
Because these problems, we don't have the luxury of forever.
Indeed.
These are problems that are urgent for now. So the scale of the problem, one of them that we're looking at is that I would say one way to think about it is that we are failing almost 3/4 of children around the world, either through systems of education that are not up to quality or children are just out of the system. So imagine if you had to hear a statistic that 3/4 of children haven't got immunization. This is massive. We're not talking about something small. So in this massive sort of crisis that's facing us, which could be almost a generational catastrophe, what can we do urgently and at scale? And that has an evidence base to really shift the results.
Yeah.
And that one such solution is shoring up the basic learning that a child has to have. Why? Because in order to succeed in the world, we have to have two sets of things that go together. A basic cognitive knowledge, basic knowledge of what we need to know, and skills and competencies that allow us to modulate ourselves to the world of work.
Interesting. Yeah.
These two things come together in this very beautiful age of pre-primary to primary school.
Yes.
This is the age at which potential is tremendous. So as we build these core skills which layer our core knowledge and alongside the competencies that are needed for jobs, we get children ready for work and life. And this is super essential for the continent.
Yes.
Because of the projection of the demographic dividend. Now, the demographic dividend means that there is a population that's coming of age, a young population that's coming of age, right? And the way it's coming of age in Africa is like nowhere else in the world.
Massive.
But if we don't invest in the demographic change, it just remains a demographic transition. It doesn't become a demographic dividend.
Yeah. Yep.
In order to make it the dividend, we need to take these core solutions to scale now. And that's where foundational learning fits in.
Interesting. Yeah, I want to bring it to the African context, and I know you started that conversation. Where does the data or what does the data say to you with regards to Africa? I mean, the numbers are a bit shocking, but sometimes there is a sense in which you could look at numbers and they feel like figures to you.
Yes.
But in reality, this is a situation that is upending in the lives of a lot of people and bleaking futures. Based on the work you've done in Africa, especially some of the most recent initiatives that you, data-driven initiatives that you've implemented, I mean, the most recent, the Foundational Learning Action Tracker.
Yes.
Where's the continent headed? Are we safe? Should we relax? Should we be alarmed? I'm not sure exactly. I look at numbers and I get downcast, but I also see all the support around, including those coming from the UNICEF, and I'm a bit convinced that we could get it right.
Yes. So I'm with you. I'm not someone who will dwell on a problem just to be like alarm bells and depressed. No. We dwell on the problem in so much as we get to the solution.
Yeah.
And I feel that's the most productive way to dwell on the problem. So we have the numbers, we have the statistics. 7 out of 10 children cannot read a basic sentence by age 10. In some parts of Africa, it's 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
Okay, we have the numbers. Now, then we have to say, why aren't they reading? Why isn't that happening? And we come to the evidence-based approach of foundational learning.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we have the problem, we have the solution. But as you and I know, solutions only remain rhetoric.
Yes.
Or they can be very nice statements of commitment, because every time someone says, we love the children of our country, it sounds really good. We believe at UNICEF we have to go from commitment to action. And the tracker is that path.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The tracker says, okay, at the Transforming Education Summit in 2022, post-COVID, at the General Assembly, everyone stood up and said, we commit to education. Education is about change. Fantastic. We got the commitment. But then how do we track them to know that action is happening? So this tracker enables us to take the core components that boost children's learning and see where countries stand. Now, the aim of the tracker is not to name and shame. The aim of the tracker is to say, areas where progress is stalled, what do we need to unpack there? What do we need to invest in? So the tracker enables us to look at elements of, let's say, what's going on with reaching children in terms of having them in school, what's going on with their assessments, what's going on with teacher support, what's going on with providing instructional materials, all the elements that are needed to have children learning joyfully, happily at their grade level.
Yeah.
And when we track these, we look at different indicators. These indicators, country by country, tell us, okay, so for example, we know for the most part, countries are doing quite well in being able to provide textbooks to children. Okay, so that's on track. We look at that and we say countries have a procurement process. It's going forward. The basic gap needs to be around resources.
Yeah.
Okay, but then we turn to some other indicators and we look at what kind of support are teachers getting. And there we see progress isn't going that far. So that tells us to unpack that situation and say, so what is the problem there? Are there sufficient teachers? Is the teacher's voice being taken into consideration? Are they getting access to the right training? Is the job meaningful? Is there attrition rate? We're able to unpack that. Or we look at the need to provide mental health and psychosocial services. That's where we are probably making the least progress. There we look and see, okay, are there sufficient trained people? Do we bring in some kind of maybe digital solutions and chatbots? What happens to helplines? So in each of the trackers, the idea is to support governments to be able to fulfill their commitments by troubleshooting and problem solving all these indicators. So we make progress. And you said, is it urgent? Is it long term? I wish we could move faster than we are moving.
Indeed.
But I think the reality is we live in a world where resources going to social sector are limited. And in the end, education is a public sector offering.
Yeah.
So resources in some ways constrain the ability to deliver on all actions. And within that envelope, we need to do more analysis on are they being used efficiently.
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the second constraint, if you allow me, is in this world right now, the primacy of education isn't where it used to be.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is a lot of issues are coming up as super urgent. Climate change is coming up as super urgent, and it is. But somehow the world is not saying we need education. We're saying either or, not and. And in this either or, sometimes education is getting shortchanged.
Yeah.
Whereas actually the learning crisis and the climate crisis amplify each other.
Yeah.
And they coexist in a way that we can actually find win-win solutions that address both.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet.
Yeah. But the way I look at it is that you need knowledge to grow understanding of the learning crisis.
Yes.
But there's another perspective I see, and this is basically by observing political behavior across the world, particularly in Africa, where there's a lot of focus on quick wins. The politician gets into office. First of all, we recognize the fact that they hold what we call the knife and the yam, and who they decide to give a cut to, you get to feed, right?
Right.
Now, we recognize that.
Right.
But for them to be in office, they need to have, a repertoire
Right.
of successes. And it turns out that education, which is a very critical aspect of
Yes.
human development, does not provide that sort of spontaneous,
Yes.
quick return on, political investment, which could also be a reason why you have that sort of a decision of which either or.
Yeah.
How do we begin to encourage sustainable political investment in education? First of all, you would understand that your key political leaders have the benefits of quality school system. Shouldn't it be a desire for them to bequeath that to children
Yes.
and their younger ones? Shouldn't it be a huge benefit to Africa that your political leaders are also, importantly, investing in the future of the continent? Where are we missing the gap here?
Yeah.
And what can we do to basically prove, or what solutions can we propose to them to say,
Right.
you know what, let us sustain on the global commitment to invest 25% of annual budgets in education and things like that, especially looking at foundational learning, which is the basis. And if we get it wrong, all else fails.
Yes. Yes.
What can we propose to them as a solution?
Yeah. I mean, I think if we had the solution so quick, we wouldn't be asking this question.
Yeah.
But I think that we haven't gone to a few avenues with this work. One is in some countries where education is a vote issue, we see a different type of attention to it. Because when it is an issue where the vote counts, then there is an action around it that will generate a response, even though the returns on education are long term.
Yes.
And even though it may not come through in the tenure of a single government, the fact that there is a way that votes leverage results is something that incentivizes action. The second is, I think the key advocacy lobbies who have a big role to play in government haven't really taken on the criticality of education. So if we look at the business sector, the private sector, the industries, how often do they talk about education? They mainly talk about it is if education leads to their pipeline of employees and or if you have an educated consumer base. But education in and of itself being a capital, that lobby doesn't come in so much. So I think while politicians and leaders make decisions, I think there's a whole ecosystem around it that as an education community, we haven't tapped into sufficiently.
Yeah.
And we haven't. So when schools shut down during COVID, what was the thing that was on every politician's mind? Families were crazy, right?
Yeah.
My kids go to school. Your teacher was your favorite person.
Exactly.
The moment COVID ended, we forgot that. But at that time, every government was talking about school and education. Every government. Why? Because it mattered to the populace.
Exactly.
We did not translate that into a sustainable change.
Action. Indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we missed the boat there.
Yeah.
Somehow, we went back to where we were. Rather than forward, building on the momentum.
And even learning some lessons from some of the, losses that we experienced there, because
Yes.
I mean, COVID introduced the concept of learning loss, or
Yes.
basically worsened it. You look at what EdTech could do in terms of using digital technology to improve and learning access
Yes.
and things like that. It does look like everybody has gone back to business as usual without exactly stopping to take stock and move ahead. Let me use that to introduce my next question.
Okay.
Where do you see bright spots across Africa, especially looking at the work that UNICEF is doing?
I have to say that this movement and momentum around the recognition of these core years of learning to be fundamental and foundational has been a really nice acceleration. I think this is something we can definitely leverage.
Yes.
I think we can also leverage digital technologies much better. And this is, I think, where a big solution lies. If we can enable the workforce in the school system to have the technologies they need to be more effective educators, we can bring a second range of transformation.
Yeah.
And this is something we're looking at super closely.
Yeah.
And I hold a lot of promise in the Africa Strategy 2065. We're entering the decade of acceleration. If we can have the right building blocks, education can be the accelerator
Indeed.
for that.
I am conscious of your time, but I want to get a bit ahead of myself.
Okay.
You're going to have more than 20 ministers in charge of education in that hall tomorrow.
Right.
You're going to have another 10 ministerial representatives. What would be your core message to them in terms of foundational learning in Africa?
That we have to believe it is the change-making transformative strategy. We have to do it like we believe it across society. It's not just a nice to have. It is necessary to make a demographic transition into a demographic dividend.
Impressive. Pierre, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you.
Your thoughts and insight and analysis are very deeply appreciated, and they are very much valued.